Thanks, Roy. Excellent job. So please join me in welcoming Jon DiPietro, Jon's principal for Domesticating IT.
So how many people are familiar with the classic adoption curve? It's been talked about a lot about lately, and I just thought it was appropriate to talk about after Roy's presentation because it's, for those who aren't familiar, it's something where it's very prevalent in social media where something becomes popular and its use will shoot up very quickly, and that becomes the adoption phase. But then what typically happens is the next phase in that adoption curve is what's called disillusionment. So you'll get that drop-off. And that's actually what's happening, I think, with blogging right now. The statistics that Roy showed and some articles that have come out recently have shown that the adoption of blogging is actually waning. And there's a couple of reasons for that with these adoption curves. And sometimes it's just plain old fatigue, right? People just go charging out of the gate and they implement these things and then they get tired of them and they walk over to the next shiny object. But in a lot of cases, the disillusionment can come from a disconnect between expectations and results. And that disconnect, a lot of times, can happen with some classic mistakes that are made in social media adoption. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that this morning. And so first of all, what's the problem? For the purposes of this audience today, I think we can break them into two fundamental problems that we have. And the first one is that we're a bunch of engineers. And the reason that's a problem is that engineers tend to be very left-brained, which means that we process information sequentially and verbally, as opposed to people who are more right-brained in their day-to-day activities, who think of things in more of a big picture and a visual sense. And the reason that's important is because the principles of creativity, context, and design are really important if you want to be successful in social media. And this is the second problem that this audience has. And this is a picture of the kakapo parrot, which is indigenous to New Zealand. And for tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of years, the biggest threat that the kakapo parrot faced was overpopulation. So over the years, it evolved a defense mechanism for itself. And that defense mechanism was whenever it faced a threat, it developed these elaborate, almost comical mating rituals that make it very, very difficult for the parrot to reproduce. So whenever that overpopulation started to happen and they felt this stress in the environment, they would reproduce less frequently, which worked really well for a long time until man showed up and introduced new predators that they never had to deal with before. So what did the kakapo parrot do when it was faced with this environmental stress? It did the same thing it had been doing for 100,000 years, which is to start reproducing less frequently, which didn't really help their cause any, right? So why is the kakapo parrot important to our conversation? Because that, in my estimation, is what a lot of companies do when they are faced with a change to their environment. Rather than recognizing that change and adopting new behaviors, they tend to just go back to doing what has made them a successful company for the last 80 or 100 years. Well, we've always done things this way and it's worked for us, so let's just do more of that, or let's do it more efficiently, or let's do it better. And as we'll see in some of the mistakes that we'll list out through the presentation, that's exactly what I think is happening. So before we talk about failure, I want to spend a minute talking about, and somebody just asked me this yesterday, what does success look like? And that's a good question. Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't look like. Success is not necessarily the size of your audience. It's not how many fans you have. It's not how many Twitter followers you have. It's not how many likes you get on Facebook. At the end of the day, if you are a business, success means getting new customers, period. If you're not going to get new customers out of it, Why are you doing it? All right, so how do we avoid failing? Well, we talked earlier about being engineers and being left brain dominant, so the left brain being analytical and the right brain being creative. One of the things that you can do to do a better job at social media and not fail is to recognize that there are tools and techniques that can help you become or think more right-brained. So it's not that engineers are incapable of right-brain thinking, it's just that that's not what we do every day. The main focus of our job is to think in that sequential analytical mindset. So it's just like anything else. You know, if you go to a gym and all you do is exercise your right arm every day, your right arm's going to be strong, your left arm's going to be weak. So we just need to engage the right brain a little bit more and start thinking more creatively. And the other thing that we need to do is, from a company perspective, companies need to escape from the matrix. So what I mean by that is that for the last 100 years plus, companies have been beholden to the owners of the media channels through which they're trying to get their message out. So that means newspapers, magazines, television, radio. If you wanted to get your message out, you had to seek out the owner and pay them in some kind of currency in order to get access to that channel. And the reality today, the fundamental difference when you talk about social media is the users are the owners. It's a huge paradigm shift from what companies are used to dealing with in terms of getting their message out. Because when the users own the medium, there's a whole different set of rules and norms that are in place. You can't simply copy and paste your old marketing strategies and tactics into this new paradigm. Okay, so that's the preamble. Now we're going to talk about 10 ways that you can avoid failing at social media. The first thing I want to talk about is something from The Art of War, which is tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. So the equivalent of that are companies that just jump into social media without a plan, without a strategy. You just have people creating Twitter accounts, creating LinkedIn groups, and just going out and tweeting, blogging, you know, with the best of intentions, and maybe they're even doing a great job at it. But the reality is that they're tactics without strategy, so they're not integrated with everything else that's going on in terms of your marketing messaging. Are those tactics aligned in a way that are going to result in you getting new customers? Without a solid strategy, the answer is, in most cases, probably not. You know, you've got a bunch of people swimming in different directions all at the same time instead of everybody focused and going in the same direction. So things like search engine optimization and feeding people into your website in a way that is going to lead to you getting more customers is difficult to do without a solid, prominent strategy. Okay, number 2, don't be a bragger. There is a marketing guru, best-selling author named David Meerman Scott. He's written a book called The New PR Rules of Marketing and several other books. And one of his favorite sayings is that nobody cares about your products or services. All they care about is what you can do to solve their problems. So when you get on social media and do nothing but incessantly talk about your world-class, industry-leading, value-added, paradigm-shifting, scalable, best-of-breed, sustainable, actionable, robust, win-win products, people just tune out. They don't care. Okay? What they want to hear about is the problem that I'm facing today. What can you do to make my job easier? What can you do to help my project be more successful? That's what they want to hear about. The more you talk about yourself, the more they're going to tune out. Number 3, don't be diabolical. So what I mean by that is that I mentioned earlier that in social media, the users are the owners, and so what that means is that there are a new set of rules that are in place. And what it also means is it's a different currency that's in play. If you want to go advertise at a magazine, you pay X number of dollars for Y number of eyeballs. Social media doesn't work that way. It's a completely different currency, and that currency is trust. So you have to establish trust with people by being generous with the information and the content that you're giving them. And what happens is when you are disingenuous on social media, and what I mean by that is trying to pull a fast one, where you are doing something where it looks like you're giving away information, but in fact you're just giving somebody a sales pitch. People are very in tune, very sensitive to those sorts of things on social media, and you generally don't get a second chance. If you try to trick somebody or fool somebody into trying to appear that you're being generous when you really aren't, you're going to lose a lot of that credibility and they'll tune out. Number 4, don't be a control freak. Again, something that companies are very used to doing is controlling the message. You're able to do that in the old media or the outbound methodologies for marketing, but in social media, you cannot control the message. All you can do is participate. Okay, so if there's misinformation out there, you have to be out there correcting the misinformation. And if you're not there, if you're not listening, you don't even realize that that misinformation is out there. So you've got to be there in the first place. You've got to be engaged. You've got to have that social currency so that when you go out and say, hey, that is misinformation, people will believe you. So again, trust, authenticity, absolutely critical if you're not going to fail. Number 5, don't herd cats. This is probably the most common thing that I see from companies who are engaging in social media. So what I mean by that is, we talked earlier about you have to have a comprehensive, cohesive strategy for your internet presence. So it's not about your social media presence is over here and your website is over here. They're all one and the same. They're all part of your internet presence, and they've all got to be aligned together so that, let's say you're doing a fabulous job at social media. You've got a Twitter account, you've got a lot of followers, you're sharing a bunch of good information, you've built up a nice big pile of social capital, and people love you to death. If you drive them to a website that is not designed to convert those visitors into customers, you've failed. That's what I mean by herding cats. Basically, what you're doing is you're driving people into a dead end. So your social media strategy and your web strategy have to be linked together so that once you are successful with social media, you can drive people to your website in a way that embraces them and walks them through a lead nurturing process to convert them from a visitor to a lead and then from a lead into a customer. Number 6, the opposite of the first point that I brought up is that strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. So this slide is really just an excuse for me to be able to bring up one of my favorite quotes from Mike Tyson, which is, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So you could put together a great strategy, right? The one that's used in business all the time is that ideas are easy, execution is hard. Okay, so you can have a great social media strategy, but if your execution is poor, you're still not going to succeed. So you need to implement boots on the ground and strategies that are going to lead to successful tactics and successful execution. Number 7, don't be boring. Real challenge in our industry, right? How easy is it to make PID loops sexy? Well, for some people, you know, they're into that sort of thing, so maybe it's not that hard. But by and large, This is where our left brain is our worst enemy as engineers, okay? Because again, I just read so much stuff and I see so many presentations where we take that sequential analytical approach. And again, it's because a lot of times it's required in our job, right? That's just the way we approach things. We start at the beginning, we do a logical progression, we take a logical progression of steps to get to the end. Okay? That doesn't work in social media. You have to start with the end first. Okay? In journalism, I'm going to talk about that in another slide. But in this case, the key to success here is storytelling. And there's a saying in journalism that goes, if you don't have a story to tell, write one. So it is possible to take your information, right, your nonfiction, boring information that you need to get across to people, you want to turn it into a story. And the way that you do that, and by the way, I have like an entire 1-hour seminar that I do on this subject, so I'm trying to encapsulate it into 30 seconds. But basically, there's this concept of something called the inciting incident. And whenever you see a good movie or read a good story, it's because there was a powerful inciting incident. The definition of that is, it is something that happens to the protagonist or the main character that throws their life out of balance. And then the rest of the story is trying to restore that balance. So in the terms of what we're talking about, the way that you take boring, nonfiction material and make it interesting is to try to come up with some kind of inciting incident. So again, if you're talking about PID control, start with the problem. Talk about something that's out of control, and at the beginning of your story, you want to provide a hint as to how you're going to solve that problem. So try to appeal to some sort of emotional level, a problem or a fear or an anxiety that people have. And that's how you can try to make your information a little bit more interesting. Don't be robotic. I was just sitting watching TV one weekend, and I was watching, I think the show on the History Channel was World War II in HD. And I'm sitting there watching it, and then the entire weekend, the History Channel was running a promotion for this new Top Gear show that was coming on. So it's at a part of the documentary where they're talking about the Battle of the Bulge and all the carnage and the misery that these guys are under and the people that are dying. And then these three bozos show up at the bottom of the screen looking at each other with big smiles, pointing up at this guy loading a howitzer. And I had to pause it and take out my camera and take a picture and put it out on Twitter and say, what the hell was History Channel thinking? That is being robotic. What they did was they just set up a software program on Friday afternoon to periodically put that little promo at the bottom left corner of the screen and didn't account for what was actually going to be on the screen when these three guys were there, and it just made them look stupid. So the same thing can happen in social media. A good example of that, there are a lot of tools out there that are really good. They help you be more efficient. And one example is on Twitter, there are tools out there that allow you to pre-schedule your tweets. So I see this a lot where people, if there are disasters going on, like the one that comes to mind is the tsunami in Japan, when all hell was breaking loose, and that was the only thing anybody was talking about on Twitter. Then every once in a while in your Twitter stream, you'd see somebody come up with this, happy-go-lucky, tweet that it just didn't fit in with the mood of what was going on right now, and that was, due in large part to tweets that were pre-scheduled. And there are some stories out there of really inappropriate tweets that were just bad luck for things that were pre-scheduled that made people look really bad. So don't be robotic. Don't be long-winded. This is where we talk about don't bury the lead. So again, that beginning to end sequential presentation of information is not your friend here. So there's a former New York Times editor, Francis Flaherty, who has one of his bits of advice is that your writing should not be as heavy as a fruitcake. Every word you write, the reader must read. So be economical with your words, which is another way of saying, there's another famous saying by Mark Twain, which was, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. Right? It's not easy to be concise. You really have to work at it. And then finally, don't be repulsive. So this is something I had to work really hard at. I always thought that you were either born with the gift to be able to create visually appealing graphics, or you weren't. And what I learned was that there are actually rules, there are principles, there are algorithms, right? Engineers, we love algorithms. You can learn some of these design principles that will help you create better looking presentations, better looking blog posts, so that when you're out there creating content and sharing this content in social media, it doesn't look like that. So, just to summarize the 10 steps, tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Don't brag, don't spend the whole time talking about yourself. Don't try to pull a bait and switch with people. Don't be a control freak. Don't hurt cats. Have good execution in addition to good strategy. Don't be boring, don't be robotic, don't be long-winded, and make your graphics look good. So that's all I have for you. Shameless self-promotion for my book, which, by the way, the publisher was good enough to issue a discount code, so if anybody's interested, I have handouts here. You can, for attendees of the conference, you can get a discount on the book if you come and see me afterwards. Thank you.